February 18th with Julia Guess. And we have readings and performances pretty much every weekend here in this theater. Coming up next Friday, we have a book launch for Cynthia Duoka's new book. It's going to be a great lineup. It's got Vanessa Angelica Villarreal, Keen Nam, several others. And on February 18th, Julia Guess, who's also teaching a workshop, is launching her book here with Morgan Parker and Diana Coy Gwynn and several others also. So please come back for our events. Check out our website. We've got a lot going on throughout the year. We do depend on the support of our community. So if you're not a Beyond Baroque member, please consider becoming a member. It costs as little as $60, $80 is a dual membership. We used to charge for these events. We're doing everything we can to keep them free, to make them more accessible. So if you have the means, becoming a member allows us to do that. And so if you want to become a member, you do it online, or you can see, I think Yvonne's going to be in the bookstore afterwards, and we'll sell you a membership. But thank you, all of you who are able to support us. Just want to say also thank you to the staff who have worked on this, Eric Alberg in the booth, Genesis Perez, who was here earlier, Pablo Capa, and our programs coordinator, Yvonne Salinas, who's up here on stage.
Thank you.
And I want to give a special thanks also to Errant Press, who've become good friends of ours this year. Launched this new book. I'm just going to tell you a little bit about our panelists. This is as a panel discussion on borders, their meaning, and I think we're going to have a really good conversation. If people just want to raise their hand as I introduce you, that would be great. Amanda Fung runs A to Z Press, a tiny risograph studio located in the San Gabriel Valley and born from their obsession with both risographs and zines. Creation of this small press has not only allowed Amanda to advance their personal art practice, but has also opened many opportunities to work with other artists on joint publications and collaborations. Work published by Amanda through A to Z Press often uses a lot of graphic design, playful illustrations, meta-humor, interesting materials, and frequent invitations to interact with the physical object itself. We have, I apologize if I mispronounce anybody's name, but Luis Blackaller, is that correct? Am I saying that right?
You said it right in English, so that's good. Yeah.
AKA Cartoon Distortion, is an artist and filmmaker from Mexico City with an interest in public space, issues of representation and diversity, popular culture, the life cycles of narrative colonialism, and good old-fashioned cinema. Luis lives in Los Angeles, where he self-publishes his personal work in collaboration with friends and family. We have with us also Ediciones Caradura. What's your actual name? Say it again? Daniel. Nice to meet you. It's a self-managed editorial collective aiming to create and distribute free and critical content. It was born at the end of 2019 in Tijuana, Mexico, initially through the edition and self-publishing of zines, mainly on philosophy, art, and politics, and the convergence between them, to later venture into book publishing and creating artistic works and exhibitions. We also have Zine Corrientes. Say your name too.
Diego.
Diego. Is a small DIY publishing project of essays about politics and literature. The intention of the project is to bring texts that weren't so easily available in the region of Tijuana or weren't available in Spanish. Almost all the texts published are presented in bilingual form, taking advantage of the format of the flip book to be able to offer both versions of the text, the translated form and the original in a single book. And then we have Iván Salinas, who is an undocumented poet born in Ciudad de Mexico. He is the assistant editor at Drifter Zine, a publication highlighting artists and writers of 818 and beyond. His poetry and prose has appeared in Backlash Lit, the Santos Review, La Rayas magazine, and the anthology Community Bridges, a reflection on civil rights published by Distill Arts. Yvonne is the program coordinator here at Beyond Baroque Literary Arts Center and lives in Panorama City with Maddie, who I think is here, and their dog Rocket, who is not.
He's here in spirit.
Huge thanks to Yvonne again for just organizing this event.
Yes. Thank you.
Finally, we have Errant Press. It's a self-publishing project by Alan Sobrino. His work formally explores books' limits, often printing books outside their traditional codex form and exploring different mediums that stories can inhabit, proposing a flexible definition of what a book is. Aside from the publishing practice, Errant Press co-edits and supports the work of Latin American book artists and independent publishers in an effort to amplify their voices and reach broader audiences. Not only do we have Alan, we also have Tanya.
Tanya.
So welcome to them, and really a big round of applause for everybody. Thank you for being here. I've talked too much. I'll turn it over to Alan.
Yes.
Hi, well, thank you all for being here. Thank you for taking the time in this Saturday to hang out and talk a little more about books. I want to start thanking Ivan, Jimmy, and of course Quentin for opening this amazing space for our project. They are one of our most important allies. Their space is actually super good. We've been here in a couple of events. We knew them because of the kind of events they make every week, and every time we're here we have a great time, and it's always a surprise to meet new people here. So thank you for opening this space and for helping other voices reach broader audiences. I sometimes don't think you realize the importance of what you're doing because it's so big that sometimes you cannot tell, but I really appreciate your work, and thank you so much for having us. We're here today to talk about this little thing. This is the Errant Passport we're launching. 3 years ago, when Tanya moved to the States and I was planning on moving here, I started working on an essay about borders. I'm a writer, I do that for work, and I started researching about borders. And in the middle of writing this essay, I realized that the evidence that supports the good things about open borders are already overwhelming. Like the evidence that favors the thought of open borders is already out there. It's not a question of if it's good or if it's bad, if it's profitable, talking about taxes or whatever. That whole thing is already set up. It's quite positive. So what is the thing about borders? Why do we keep thinking about borders the way we think, even though the evidence for open borders is already there? Well, the thing is, it's a cultural thing. It's a mind thing. It's a mind border. So instead of writing that essay, I came up with this little book. This little book, it's a passport in all its way. It has a cover, and it's based on the Declaration of Human Rights, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The Article 13 allows everyone to free transit the world. And even though it's in the Declaration of Human Rights, this is not actual reality. So we made this little passport that makes you, first of all, choose your name, because we are all given a name when we arrive into this planet, but we didn't choose our name. So this gives you the opportunity for a fresh start, to choose your name from the beginning. It also lets you choose your sexuality, not as a given gender, but as any form you can give your sexuality. Now you are in the power to choose how to articulate your sexuality. And last, it gives you just one place of birth. You cannot choose your place of birth. And it's not a country, it is not a nation, but it's planet Earth. We are all here together, sharing this space, we like it or not. And to put something in between that idea, I think it's like not the healthiest thing to do. That's why I only choose one place of birth, that it's planet Earth. And then it comes with a little autonomy declaration saying that the body is the only land we own. The only land we can actually take care of and decide who's coming in, who goes out, is our own body, our own flesh. So for me, that's the only physical border that matters. And it is printed here in this Declaration of Autonomy. And then, instead of writing about open borders, I decided to put little QRs in the visa pages, and each one of these QRs goes to a medium that shows a reflection about borders. So for example, the first QR goes to a video, a 30-minute video of people jumping over the subway border. And this is quite symbolic for borders, because one thing I realized while reading about borders is that no matter how big the wall is, there is always going to be someone ready to jump over it. It doesn't matter how the technology or the, it can be really dangerous. It doesn't matter. People are going to go over it, because migration is a natural phenomenon. It is not something new. It's been happening for as long as we are humans. The thing that is new is someone stopping you for migrating. So every of these QRs is a small thing, a small thought about this idea of open borders to try to put the discussion in the public space rather than in an essay where I say what I think it's good or not. So that's the Errant Passport. And instead of me talking 2 hours about this, and I surely can, I decided to invite my friends. All of them are publishers, as you've heard. And I wanted to ask them about their views about borders. So that is what this panel is about. It's an exploration about different thoughts and different meanings of what borders are. And we prepared a series of 5 questions for each of the participants. I don't know if you want to start with these questions, or do you have anything to add, Daniel?
I want to add just one thing because you mentioned it. At the beginning, Alan was thinking to name it the Flesh Passport, something like that, because because of the flesh thing being your own country. But it ended being the Errant Press, which errant is a very popular word in Spanish. It's errante, and we thought it's perfect that there is a translation, errant. But it looks like it is not a very common word, so I want to I want to just like make that parenthesis to say errant is like moving around without like a goal where to go, like just moving around. Well, at least that's my sense of the word in Spanish.
Without a clear path, right?
Without a clear path, just moving. So that's why it is the Errant Passport. And with that said, I would love to open the questions. And I think I will go with the first question, which is like, do you have like your own definition of what is a border, or what a border means to you, or borders in general? You can be as broad as you want to be. I know there is people from like different, so that's what we try here. There is people from multicultural backgrounds. So is there someone who wants to start answering that question?
I could start.
Thank you, Luis.
I'll do it in mathematical terms.
Okay.
Awesome.
But first, I'm gonna say that to me, this could be considered an opinion, but I think it's a fact. Is that the story of humanity is a story of migration, and the proof of that is that we're all here in a continent where no humans ever evolved, right? So that's important. If we cannot move, then we're choking ourselves to death, just like my mask is doing to me. Now, I was fortunate enough to have formal training as an academic mathematician back in the day when I remembered all that. And one of the subject matters that really intrigued me because of their poetics was the topology of sets, which has to do with shapes and how they relate to each other. And one thing that was interesting to that was the idea of what constitutes an open set, what constitutes a closed set, and what's a border between sets, right? And it turns out you have a piece of paper. This is not very mathematical, but it actually illustrates the point. And you draw a circle. You can tell that there's something inside the circle, then something outside the circle, and then there's the circle itself. And that's the basic topological idea of interior, exterior, and boundary, where the boundary becomes the border. And we're talking about a lot of synonyms here, like boundary and border. In Spanish it could be like frontera, orilla. We all have this, the semantics are fuzzy, exactly what determines a border. Is it something that separates two things? Probably yes. It turns out to define some sense of belonging, right? Do you belong to the interior of the circle? You belong to the exterior of the circle? Or do you belong to both or none of them? And then you're in the circle itself, right? In this case, the circle is a line, but it could be something else, like borders could be like this. They can also be like this. In Mexico and the U.S., I think it's very like this. And it's very weird. It's a overlap of things that have happened over hundreds of years with the indigenous people that were here before, and then all these colonizers that got colonized over the other colonizers. And it's just so crazy. You could choose to belong inside the circle, and then that can give you a sense of identity. I am inside the circle, or I'm outside the circle. That's also a sense of identity. So belonging feels like identity as well. So our borders used to tell us a story of belonging and identity, and then when do they turn into like an excuse for like exclusivity or property over things, right? The fence around your lawn, that's a border, right? Mm-hmm. It protects your property. The human right to move around the world freely, I believe in it. Opposed to that are property rights, right? Some people would say, I'm like them, human rights before property rights. Other people would say, property rights are human rights. I think when you say property rights are human rights, you support the story of something like a nation as an absolute, something that is a natural thing to you, that helps you determine that you belong to something that can exclude others. So borders are used to exclude in a way. It's like, I belong and you don't. To what and why? It's fairly artificial. So I went from like topology to just politics in 30 seconds. But that's what I think borders are. They are, to me, things that somewhat separate and help identify a sense of belonging, a sense of identity, a sense of property. I don't think they are necessary, and I don't think they are useful. And that's an introduction to my opinion, I guess.
Thank you, Luis.
And it's a very interesting paradox because the most profitable and the empires founded themselves in a open borders policy. If you think of the Roman Empire or even the States in the beginning, they were open for migrants, and they were created by people migrating. And eventually, it was big enough for them to say, "Oh, it's enough. Now we are from here, and you are not." But like it happened like in the space of a few years.
We ended up living in a world where like goods flow freely, but people don't. Right? Why?
Yeah, crazy, right?
Why?
Freely.
The goods do.
Yeah, the goods do. Yeah.
There are always
there are taxes, but
yeah, there is.
Still.
Thank you. Someone else wants to add on their personal border definition?
I don't have like a definition. I just think of, when I hear border, I think of 2 or 3 things. I think 2 types of borders or 3 types of borders. There's like natural borders or like rivers or mountains or something given by the nature, and then I think of this kind of artificial borders that once created by the nations, between nations, in order to protect interest, economic interest, political interest, and I also see the property as I also see the border as a property, right? For example, in Mexico, every house must have a wall between because there is a strong relation with property and goods and okay. So that's why I think when I hear about walls and dividing lines, I think of walls. I think of rivers, mountains. I think about private property, I also think on that economic part of the value of the work. For example, the value of the work in one part of the border is so much bigger than the other part of the border for the same kind of work, for example. And for me, I think the border as a relation of what part of the border are you? You know, you are inside or you're outside, or you are from one on other part of the border. In how it determines how you live.
Definitely.
For example, if you take an aerial photography from the border of Tijuana and San Diego, you can see how the Tijuana is very close to the border. It's like just one street, and then there are houses and a lot of stuff. But then the other side, it's like there's nothing for kilometers, right? It seems like one country is trying to get into another, but it cannot cross it because there is that wall. On the other part, it's like they don't want to be close to the border. Right? it's very disturbing seeing from an aerial view. So when I see this part of the border, I don't know. I think it's what I think about.
Thank you. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you. When I was starting this, I was talking a lot to a Mexican writer called Pablo Soler Frost. And he has a very good, I like his definition about national borders. He says, borders are imaginary lines drawn by fear. And I like this definition because it actually like, yeah, when you see San Diego and Tijuana, you can see that imaginary line drawn by fear. But of course, you have the natural borders that you cannot like. They are there. They are real. You can. They are already there. That's very interesting.
Yeah, I think
Ivan?
I'd like to add to that. You know, what comes to mind to me is, of course, geographical borders, and I do think of the man-made border that personally has been really impactful in how I go about my day-to-day of being someone that, you know, crossed from Mexico to the U.S. And to me that has kind of like marked, that crossing is like marking a beginning of having like this dual identity, and how that my perception of myself has kind of changed. I kind of divide my life in like in a border too, of having childhood in one place, and my childhood is contained in this region, and the end of it is kind of like once I cross this line, right? And I think of that and have this view of borders also being vulnerable. How is it that, you know, it's convenient at this time for that line to exist in that time, but like in that time and place is what it is right now, but for how long will it stay that way? And that is a, you know, question or decision that will like develop eventually. Like it's a combination of decisions actually, of how long will this structure stay there, and how will it dictate lives, right? And I also think of like with there being natural borders, being in a valley, like growing up in Mexico City, that is a valley, and we are contained in, you know, this circle of mountains really. And now I'm here in the San Fernando Valley where I currently live, and you also have this this like borderline that surrounds us, and we have this sense of belonging of, you know, we're from this area, and it's determined by, you know, whether you live in this certain neighborhood or you share the same area code. But that's how it's been present in my life, having this this sense of belonging, like what Luis was talking about, But the last thing that came to mind was a line by a Chicano writer, a poet, Alfred Arteaga. And he has this really, I don't know, like prophesizing line that says that Chicanos have contributed a sense of border to humanity, to the world, and it's there in serial time and chaos that we make life. So that kind of, I don't know, that speaks a lot to me. Just having that duality or that rebelliousness of like crossing something you're not supposed to. You know, it's kind of like a statement, you know, and like crossing a boundary. So, yeah.
I also like this thing you were saying, because borders are also a line in space-time, a line of space in time or a line of time in space, and they change, because if you review any country, you're gonna see that their borders are not the same 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 50 or 100 years ago. And this is very interesting because it talks about the mobility of borders, right?
Even going back to the topology of it all, it's not clear that it's been a line throughout history. I think throughout the lines, I think, are probably a very artificial visual representation of what the nation state does now than ever before, when borders were really fuzzy and always moving around with whoever conquered what fort or whatever it was, right? It's kind of like, it's very tricky. Think about like, just what's the border of the Mayan nation throughout history? Were there lines?
There's no.
The lines came when, you know, Central America got invented by the independence of like these countries from the New Spain and all. It's like it's fuzzy, but like your identity, like the one that you subject to, really helps you determine where you think you are, and oftentimes like I think of myself as a citizen of the borders. You know, I'm like, I'm not here nor there, and I don't want to be. You know, it's like strange.
So I have been hearing a lot about like this division of identity. I think that's a common thing that I'm be hearing, but I wonder if Amanda or Diego has something to add to this definition of borders.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so actually it's funny because for this Zine Fest, Alan, who invited me, was like, oh, you know, it'll be interesting if, you know, any of us have zines about this concept of borders, but it's not mandatory. And I was thinking like, oh, I didn't have any concept, or like, it's not a question that I thought about before. And then at the 11th hour, on Thursday night, I met that day with a friend, Soleil, who's in the audience today. And we had a conversation about this concept. And then later that night when I was showering, I was like, I had this like epiphany. And then afterwards, I was like typing on my laptop and I was like, oh shit, like this whole poem just like flowed out of me. So I'll read it. It's fairly short, but I ended up making like this scroll zine out of it, which is very cool. I was kind of like, oh, it's kind of like a map that you can like unfurl. But basically this poem was me questioning what are borders. So what are borders? To keep out, to keep safe, to exclude, inside, outside. Is it a privilege to be within the border, outside the border, between the border? What is a border but a line? To keep us in line, follow the line. Who of us are out of line? What is a border? Is it geopolitical? Is it personal? Physically on us? Around us? All over inside of us? What if no borders suit me? What if by circumstance all borders reject me? What am I now? Invisible? Stateless? Meaningless? Am I not simply human, by virtue of my breath. Whether I stand at a crossroads of all the world's borders, or the borders of your eyes, the borders of your mind, projected onto me. No, I will decide where I stand, in this body, on this land, border or no borders. Thanks.
That's deep, like.
Thanks.
You go through.
Yeah, I was, it's cool because everyone who has spoken so far kind of like reflected what I had written, and I feel like when I was trying to answer this question of what are borders, I was having a little bit of difficulty like articulating what I wanted to say or what I felt. But then when I wrote this, I was like, okay, I think this is, it got out. So that's my answer.
Thank you. Yes, it's like hard to, I think in general it's hard to define borders. I wonder if you, Diego, has something to add.
Well, when I think about borders,
What does it mean to you? And also, like, you live in Tijuana.
yeah, when I think about borders, like for example in Tijuana, we come across like this common language of this common sense of what like border, like sometimes means one thing, like for say like crossing the border of USA or Mexico. Like for example, for me, like in a position like thinking about the border, like it's common associated with like la frontera, the frontier. Like thinking about when they say about the relation, for me like a border is like a relationship. But for example, in this case, like the relationship is a very asymmetrical one, because who is the one that wants to establish the border, or who is the one that has the necessity to like establish this distinction between like two regions. And even if like we think so, we like this is like a very artificial like sense is very assimilated. I think so in the like in the community of the region, because we always think like we say like la línea, the line, for referring to the U.S. or el otro lado, the other side, and it's this kind of like this relationship like has been assimilated in a way that I think is like a very like differentiated, like makes a difference. For example, I think like the relationship between like thinking about U.S. and Mexico, there is like a big emphasis for me like in making like a separation. Even if we say like there is a like cultural exchange between the region that exists, but at the same time exists like for me like they are very like in a sense like excluded, because even if there are this exchange that I'm talking about, you can sense that it's not the same like being on one side or the other side. Like the like what constitutes like think about me and the other side, and it's very different for each people. For example, for me it's like I have like this privilege of thinking about the border of like living. I have a house. I can move easily in the city, but these concepts are not the same for everyone like living there, because not for everyone is going to take like the sense of the border in like the same political ways.
Mm-hmm.
Like even if I cross the border and I think about it, for me it's like a very easy thing to do, like to cross one side to the other side. Like I have a visa, I can cross easily. But in reality, how many people in Tijuana can do that? Like
Yes.
even if it's the percentage is like a bunch of people, but how many like travel a lot and cannot cross? So for me, like a border has her limit, like establishing between like in a sense like what you were saying and other ones, like a very contemporary sense of a hard limit of culture and exchange of like language, just the culture, like economics, sociology, like it's like a way to make, in a sense, like well this physical and cultural like wall for me.
Walls. So walls, barriers, distinguishment, like segregation is something that I have been hearing a lot. And I have heard this fact from Alan before, but I don't know if I'm right. One of the first borders that were made by humans in history is already like a space you can visit and like walk around. And you told me about this a couple days ago.
Which wall?
This wall that is
The
just
Adriano's wall.
the Adriano's wall. So it's a
Yeah.
wall that was there because
So the Roman Emperor Adriano built this wall that crosses 3 continents, the Adriano's wall. The Adrian's wall, I think it's in English. It crosses 3 continents. Is one of the biggest walls in the world. And now it's like you can go and walk there, and it's just like a
playground.
yeah, it's a playground. It's not a border anymore, and that's why I was telling that borders are aligned in the space-time because they disappear, they move, they change. Now Adrian's Wall, it's just a tourist spot you can visit, and it's not containing any migration at all anymore. And this is going to happen to the wall in Mexico eventually, even though some people don't like it or we like it a lot. And this is very interesting. And about the identity thing you were saying, I also thought when I made this, I realized that a lot of my neighbors, I have more similar things with a lot of my neighbors in America than with my neighbors in Mexico. And that's crazy because when we talk in identity, we're expecting that when you move, you're not going to find this. You're not going to keep your identity just as clear as that. But for me, I realized that it's not, my identity does not belong where I was born. It's actually something more sublime. It's in a higher aspect of myself. It's that. But at the same time, I realized that Spanish for me is a big border because I cannot be me, 100% me in English, because all the jokes and all the things that make me being me are not there when I speak English. So eventually I realized that the language for me is a higher border, a higher wall than actually the wall between the States and Mexico, because I can find my identity here as well. And maybe that leads us to the second question, the free movement.
Yeah, so we have been talking about borders, and I like that Daniel mentioned that there are borders that are actually there, a river that might not let you go to the other side or will make it hard to go to the other side. But in general, like borders nowadays are also things that we set up as humans. So I wonder if you have recently crossed a border, like a real border or whatever real means, or a personal border, and how was your experience? Can you talk about the last border you crossed?
It can be sensible, spiritual, physical, or quantum
Yes.
borders.
The last border I crossed was the one in Juárez and there.
How was it
Today.
today?
I actually, when I was crossing the border, I was thinking on this question, and I write something because we all when you cross the border, you always feel like you must be in alert or something.
Yes.
Like, what's going to happen? I might have something that I can have problems with the sea. So I have this in Spanish, but the experience is to show how much citizen you are. Because when I crossed the border yesterday, also because I have to get the permit to come to Los Angeles. And when I was crossing the border, there was like 45 minutes walking. And then I think, why I don't have this sentry or something? But then I was watching the requirements for get the sentry, and I think it seems like the state needs to know how sure or how trusted you must be in order to they give you this kind of trust, of trusting in you for crossing the border. So I think there must kind of citizenships. So it makes me think on that concept. I think that the citizenship as a dispositive of the states to organize people, and how this, if you're a citizen, you're more human maybe than other people that doesn't have any documents, and how these IDs determine how you are able to cross borders or not, or this material means you have let you go to the cross the border easily, right? Because if you
Yes.
have the center, you have to pay like 100 per year, so you don't do line. Because
Or
I
like
was,
So if you
like
pay-
the global entry.
yeah, if
Yeah.
you,
Oh,
you
yeah, yeah.
If you,
So if
but
you pay, you are more trustworthy. You can, we can
It's
trust
easier
you.
to cross. Yeah,
Yeah.
That's right.
And I think this positive of citizenship, it comes from colonization, how the colonizers divided people between, we came from there and you are from here, but I'm more human than you, or something like that, and how people were separated from a lot of aspects. And and the last experience was like, if I'm about to make a crime or something, because there's only cops in the border, right? And you're like, hey, where are you going? I'm just going to a Zine Fest or whatever. And I don't know. I don't feel that safe with that many questions, or I feel like nervous or something. Even if I don't have if there's not any reason to do that. I don't know, it's like, and I think I remember when I crossed the border with my mother when I was a kid, she always had this, I feel always that with her, she always was like, hey, don't move, hey, don't
Yes.
love to
Yes.
have. I was like, okay, this place, I must be quiet, I must be like,
Behave.
yeah.
I was always nervous, whenever crossing the border too. I don't know.
I think
I
if
didn't
you're
know it was a
Mexican
common thing.
yeah.
and you're crossing the border, you feel
You're
like,
like-
you're gonna get arrested.
Yeah, it's like,
Somehow, I don't know why I feel the same thing. Like
Just because you are not from here.
just
like,
because you're not
You're in danger.
worthy of.
yeah, and that the experience of I think people behave different from one another country.
For sure.
If you come from Mexico, you behave better here. It's
Yeah.
like
Yes.
I'm gonna
You drive
I'm gonna
better.
drive
Yeah.
better. Also, if some people here goes to Mexico, it's like, I can drink way more than I could do that. It's
Yeah.
like people behave different in every part of the border.
The border, yeah, for
That's
sure.
true.
And the same goes from here. I've heard of a lot of Americans going to Tijuana to
Yeah.
get wasted and like
Yeah,
have the party they can't here, right?
yeah, it's a lot of histories or myths of Tijuana.
Yes, I'm sure. I'm sure.
Have you crossed a border, some of you, recently?
Well, for me, it's the same. I crossed today too. In difference of like Daniel, I crossed in a car, like for to get us here. And it's like, for me, I could like say some of the same things, but what I think about is like this. When I think about this relation of the police, like being right there, it's like you are doing this time or this line of like the línea that you have to do to cross the border. Like, for example, in car it's more like I did today like 1 hour and a half, I think. But sometimes it can be like 3 hours, like 4
I have been there
hours,
5
4
hours.
hours at least, yeah.
And in this sense, like for me, this starts like these sets. I would say again, like relations, or like this set of what you have to do, how do you have to behave, like in a sense. For me, like this, you are in a position when for example, el migrant has like this. It has the power to do like anything. For example, you can be sent to secondary inspection. You can be like ask a lot of questions. You can look. You are in a like defenseless in space because you have like a lot of police. You have these limits of the when you move. For example, for me, for saying in my experience, the car, like I have these bumps. Like you cannot move in a like normal way.
You're being stopped.
Like you're very constantly stopped. Like you can go, you can't return like in an easy way if you can. Like there's like these impediments, like are very also constant. And for example, for me, like Daniel, I'm very anxious about like crossing the border. In theory, like if you are not from here, you can't sell things here. So in that sense, like I'm thinking like I'm going to participate in events, like consider like in a market, like a small market or selling, like generates in me like this sense of like anxiousness, like nervous. So it's like, for example, for me always when I am like driving, walking, like if I carry these things or I carry these things that I am too, like for example, what I think, what I like, what are my actions.
Anarchist books also.
Yeah.
Where you worry because they are anarchist
I
books.
think about like my social media.
Yes.
I get very paranoid sometimes, like when crossing borders, because you have to like, in a sense, I know that, for example, what I am is not a valid thing in a sense of a crossing at the border of the U.S. For the ideas are not proved in a sense of like the government speaks like for individuals or Mexico that want to enter. Like there is a very different relation, I think, like for example, I don't know, if someone from Europe want to enter the US, there's a very different like how do you speak, how do they speak to you? But at the same time, for example, there also if you are like for a culture of other part of the world, they treat you like very bad too. So I have talked about some people like very recently in Egypt, like someone from Korea or South Korea, sorry. He said like how they treated him like, what are you doing? Why are you crossing? Like they they asked for their cell phone. So it was a very like he felt like what is happening here, like for me it's like thinking about like why is like this specific region is like this, like why feel some like he said like so violent sometimes.
And this is the land of freedom,
Yeah.
but you don't feel
And
free.
you think a lot of people like cross every day, like there is people even if they all like have the legal entrance to the US, there is a too like a sensation of anxiousness of crossing this border.
For sure.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
And it's crazy how you can cross to the other side just like driving without
No one asks you anything.
meeting customs or whatever. You just
You
drive.
can carry a corpse. No one will not.
Yeah, you can have anything in
And
your,
talks
in
about
your
like
trunk.
this relationship, right? Like this, in the sense that this economic relation that is between the US and Mexico.
It's beyond that, right? It's, I mean, it feels like the contemporary citizenship system is some way of legalizing a global caste system of some kind. Like you're certified to belong to some country, then you have access to the top shelf. Otherwise, you'll have to figure out to pay for it, and maybe we'll let you. You see the strata there. It's like nations and passports.
But I think you can track these down all to the Roman Empire. I think they were the first ones to introduce us to this. And from then on, we have been following the same the same ways. The biggest empire settles up the rules, and we all have to follow them.
Yeah.
What is the last border you have crossed, Amanda?
I guess my border that I thought of is a little bit different than everyone else's.
I like that.
Okay. I thought of more of like a personal border rather than a physical border. Also because with COVID still happening, like my brother and I are still not really leaving the house that much, but obviously in the last like year and a half, it's gotten a little bit better, or maybe not better per se, but just, I guess maybe we felt more comfortable. And yeah, so anyways, so physical borders haven't really been crossing very many other than like my house and the outside. But yeah, the personal border, I would say, since like the halfway through last year, I've been really getting into zines and started tabling at my first Zine Fest, and yeah, it's been really fun and gratifying to meet other people in the zine community and like get to connect with others and like make friends, and I think that for me has been a very I don't know, I think like 2 to 3 years ago it would have been difficult for me to imagine doing that, just because I'm like, oh, I'm so introverted and like this is not something I can see myself doing. So I kind of also interpreted it that way as a border, where I'm like, this that cannot, like, that's not something I imagine that I can do. That's not me. Like, I don't see myself as a person who can like speak on a panel and like be here with other people and have like a discussion in front of other people. I'm like, whoa, that sounds like really scary. I don't think I can do that. And so there's a lot of those things in my mind that I've ended up labeling and be like, this is something that I don't think I can do and I cannot see myself doing. And then over time, I just start believing that, right? And then later it's like, oh, I'm actually doing these things. And it's not as hard as I thought, or it's like a lot more fun. And like gratifying than I thought, and like I'm actually capable. So I think like there's a lot of those things I'm trying to lean into more, especially with just like the self-publishing community and the zines and Risograph. Like people have been very responsive and receptive to just the community energy is just so it's just so nice and so welcoming. Quite different to other art. I don't know. There's for some time, I was trying to get into the entertainment industry, and those of you who might know, it's very cutthroat, it's very competitive. It's not necessarily like everybody's like instantly friends and like, oh, let's trade zines. Like, it might be like, oh, let's be friends. Like, where do you work? And like, you don't know if people have like underlying motives for like trying to get to know you. So that's like, I guess, starting to ramble, but I am very grateful to like be here and like be able to cross that personal border that I didn't think.
And do you think you cross that border and it's still there, or it disappear?
I think it's definitely in flux. Like, I'm like, even until this moment of sitting here, I'm like, oh, okay, I think I'm okay. It's like, oh, cool, this is going good, nice. And then later, maybe another time, I'm gonna be like, oh man, I don't know if I can do that again or something. I don't know, but like I think it's like slowly, like step by step, building. It's like crossing and then like maybe kind of going back and then no, I think it's okay. And like
so you're moving your border.
Maybe like we were saying, like borders move over time, right? Like yeah.
I love this because when I was talking to Pablo Soler Frost about this book, he said that he had mental, spiritual, and sensitive borders that he put to himself. And these were the ones he regret the most. Mm-hmm. And I think that it's true. Like the border I regret the most are the ones that I put to myself, thinking I could never go this way or that way. And eventually, like, you can. You
exactly.
Can. Thank you. Ivan?
Yeah. I mean, I haven't crossed the border, like la línea, no la he cruzado hace más de 10 años. But I think that like every, like Amanda, every new phase of my life that I'm throwing myself into new situations, new adventures too. It's like crossing a border, even visiting a neighborhood in LA that is so vast that you feel like you're in a totally different place. And I mean, I have at least that freedom of mobility, and it's just a matter of like actually going for it. My commute here is kind of, you could say it's kind of crossing the border. I mean, like the 405, it's a
huge border. That's a border.
Right, it's
10
like
lanes border.
5 lanes of
It feels like 10.
Yeah. And I mean, when you think of that natural border of mountains, it takes twice as long to drive through that versus this straight, pass through. So that's like my everyday. But I'm thinking of like what you guys go through of having to present all your papeles and all of that to verify who you are and what your intent is here. And the last time I was asked for that was, or that I present an identification is always, I don't know, going to a bar or something, or like asking for something that's only for adults. So I don't really have like such intense experiences and crossing a line like that, because I think if I would we locked up or something. So that's even more intense. But
Yes.
it's like something I would want to avoid because you lose all kind of any freedom that you can think of, really. So yeah, I think one last thing to add is that with zines and like how I think about my work as a writer, having the experience of being around people that are trying to push those boundaries with just bookmaking as well is kind of inspiring, and it's like a border that I want to cross with how I go about and presenting ideas, and so I think that's the new frontier. So.
What about you, Luis? Any border crossed recently?
I mean, I'd like border, I don't know, maybe, no. I haven't, I think.
That's good. You live a borderless life.
A border-free life.
Well, I do feel like I'm in the liminal space. When you think about national identity, yeah, I don't know where I belong. When you think about these artificial spaces in which, you know, regular human beings are subject to abuse by institutions in power, those are everywhere, but I don't know if like all of them qualify as borders, you know. I don't do this very often, but every time I'm in an airport, I feel the same way I would feel when I'm about to cross the border in Tijuana or something like that. I've crossed the border walking, in cars, airplanes, and not just, I mean, this one is a very particular one, right? This one between Mexico and the U.S. But other borders, you know, have their things, and depending on like how you look like and where you come from, you're gonna be treated differently. It's just what happens, and it's not great. But one thing that, you know, this systems of control. One thing that I have, it probably sounds stupid, but one thing I have refused to do forever is to go through that scanning thing on the airports. You know, I grew up in Mexico City. You get pat down to buy tortillas there. It's like no problem. So I don't have a problem getting a pat down. I feel good. So I don't go, and I always are stopped. I'm stopped. I have to wait another 20 minutes, and they pat me down, and I don't have to go through the scanning machine. And I just do it because it's my right to do it in a way. You know, like anybody could do that. Doesn't matter where you're from. You just say, I'm not doing that, and that's it. Funny thing, right? The U.S. has been pretty cavalier about it, you know. They just go like, okay, wait there. Then they pat you down. Some of them are grumpy, some of them are not, whatever, you know. But I had the opportunity to try the same thing in London Heathrow once. And oh my God, they treated me like a terrorist.
Oh no.
Like, it was like crazy. They tried to intimidate me into going through the machine for like a half hour.
Oh my God.
With like blatant lies about like, well, there's going to be a law next week that is going to make it illegal for you to refuse to go through this thing, and things like that. I'm like, what? They ended up like taking me to a dark room. They like, it was crazy. I'm like, wow. I like had the standard as a Mexican that the Americans are the worst at treating Mexicans, and I was like, yeah, they are, but you know, there's their dad, the Brits. I don't know. I was like crazy. So there's this stuff that is like, there's the borders, and then there's this kind of like enforcement of control upon access to spaces. That's like very strange and difficult to swallow.
It's also the people with power to protect.
I mean, that's what it's all about. But like, yeah, I don't think. I mean, crossing a border. looking forward to crossing the border down to Mexico City very soon, but I haven't done it since the beginning of the pandemic for various reasons. I used to do it all the time. In the plane, it's different. You don't feel the border crossing. You feel those artificial airport balloons where they make you feel like you're crossing the border the same way, right? You're waiting for the immigration people to check on your papers, and if you don't say the right thing or whatever, they can take you to the secondary inspection and make you open your suitcase and find the chorizo there, and then you're screwed. It's kind of that kind of thing. Yeah.
I'm always terrified to travel with this and being in the border with 100 fake passports and trying to explain, no, it's a conceptual essay.
It's hard. It's hard. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel you.
Oh my god.
Yeah. I don't know. Just ranting.
Yeah.
So one of the things we all have in common is that we are all self-publishers and we believe in the do-it-yourself philosophy. Everyone here makes their own stuff and prints their own material, some stuff with political views. And I would love to ask you guys, how do you think we can shorten the borders with our readers? I mean, for me, it's doing sometimes bilingual books or trying to do events in Mexico and the U.S. and being everywhere. But I would love to hear you guys talk a little bit about how do you think we can shorten borders with our readers? Because there is definitely a border between our printing stuff and the final audience. So how do you think we can shorten that space between us?
And I can start by saying it's not by making free stuff, because I have heard we have this scene that you are supposed to steal. It's not free, but you're supposed to steal it. And there are people that have told me that they stole it, but they haven't read it. So
they're just in for the fun. Of stealing it.
I'm pretty sure that making it free is not a border.
It's not the answer.
It's not the answer.
To kill the border, yeah. So what do you guys think about this?
I don't know. An event like this, a party like this, is a way to get close to people who are going to read the passport, because I don't know. It helps to understand everything around the publication, right? This is one thing I think about how you can get close, or you can destroy this border between the book, the person who make the book, and person who read the book. Also, I don't know. For example, almost all the things we publish are like ediciones Caradura. I don't use my name. Alejandra doesn't use his name. It's like we are like 7 persons in the collective. So almost everything we publish, it's on the name of the collective. I think, for example, if sometimes it's me in the table selling the fanzines. Sometimes it's other people. I think it's like we are not. This is not me. We are many faces in different places. I think it's a way to get close. This kind of this personalization of the things.
Author,
Yeah. I don't know. Also, collaborations with people. It's like we have published some fanzines in collaboration with other people. We have, I don't know. The last one with collaboration was on mental health. What we think on mental health, and some people sent over illustrations, some little text. And this is a way to get close. I don't know what is. This is the 3 things I think to get closer across this border. The first one was we are a collective, and we don't adopt this author figure.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think it's another. No, it's
The collective approach. No, I love
Collective
this.
approach.
I love
in
this. We
general.
also believe in the collective approach. Sometimes the ego of the authors don't let this happen. Sometimes the ego of the authors is too big to make it collective, but I definitely think the collective approach is a way to shorten borders, definitely. Who else?
You don't want to say anything, it's okay.
I can say something. Okay, well, one, I used to work at a publishing company, so I definitely saw firsthand how much bureaucracy and like red tape and gatekeeping there is in traditional publishing. I think with self-publishing, it's definitely, I mean, you can do whatever you want. So it's already that, it's like the first step to shortening the sort of border between you and like the reader or the audience. Yeah, I think it's like such a nice thing about self-publishing, and like for me personally, having gotten into zines, because I'm like, oh my god, I could like make anything I want. Like for example, too, like this one that I made, I literally just made it yesterday, and it's like the turnaround is so fast, and it's like boom, I can already have it in, like get it into people's hands immediately, and yeah, it's especially for like, you know, when people use zines to spread awareness and for activism, it's like even more so because it's like you can get that information out like very easily and more accessibly. But I think for me, I kind of thought of it as we were talking, but I really like making my stuff interactive so that it involves the audience having to touch the physical object in some way. For example, with this one too, it's like rolled up into a scroll, but sorry, I'm just gonna take this part. The poem is written on this side, and I just mirror imaged it on the other side, but there's a line down the middle that I also perforated, so you can just also like tear it in half if you want. Like, I don't know, I think it's like cool to just add things that are very tactile to my pieces. And Diego had a zine that was like kind of, I have one like this too, but it's like a how do I explain without having it? It's like a you open it and then there's a smaller one, you open that and then a smaller one and it gets smaller. Exactly. And then I believe you you didn't make it, but somebody else made the zine that is like made of fabric and like plushy. Yeah, so it's yeah. It's just so cool because it's like when you see it, you already immediately want to touch it. So I feel like you made a good point, Tanya, about like making it free doesn't make it automatically, it will make them read it, but like something that will like make them touch it and be like, what is this? I think that definitely helps. Yeah.
I like. So
and I love that of your work, that you can interact with every piece. It's really fun.
I agree with yours and also the other artists that you represent. Like everything at your table is always like, I want to touch everything. It's very interesting. Like the format that keeps changing is like, oh, this is like, that's what I really enjoy too. So, yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Collective, interactive.
Collective.
How else can we
What else?
short the?
Well, it is to by increasing accessibility as much as possible, and
Yeah.
one of them is definitely in language. If you're working with a literary medium, poetry, fiction, words in general, you can translate them, right? And you make that information accessible to a whole different group of people. But I think that has its own limits, right? You can only, I'm only someone who's mastered English and Spanish, but outside of that, is like that would have to be towards somebody else that decides to translate it, right? Or AI, well, maybe at some point we'll let them do it.
Soon.
But, hopefully not that soon, though. Technically, you can put that text will spit out what you actually meant or what is in that text. Some things get lost in translation. So I've seen now also texts that are multimedia to interact with different senses of, not just what you're reading, but if you can't read, then maybe you can hear it. So that's a way to also make it accessible to somebody else who has an impairment. In like a context of like disability. for the project that Maddie and I have with Drifter, it started out as an impulse to have artists and writers locally send us their work, and we can showcase it and build community with that. So we wanted closure amongst our neighbors, amongst people that, you know, we live like 5 minutes away from each other and they don't know about each other. We went to different schools or whatever. So now there's at least a collective through the project that we've been carrying on for it's almost going to be 3 years now. We've been able to have that to build that community, and I think that goal still is there for us, because even though we're only a few miles away, 20 miles away from here, it still feels like we're in a different scene out of like greater LA, or just scenes that or publications that we see are like very present in this side of LA, right? So so that's how we are going on about Drifter. But personally, the scenes that I'm making are also more involved with language, with poetry, and I try to translate everything that I write in Spanish and in English, but no todo siempre se traduce.
Yeah.
So that's kind of hard, but one thing that I do add to almost all the scenes I make is a playlist, and I feel like at least there's a connection with music that even though other people are making it, the curation of it has ideas that are present in what I'm writing, that maybe if you enjoy that more, at least I can, I can share that with you. So.
I like that because you talk about language, and music is a way, of course, there's people who cannot hear, but still the vibrations, there is emotions and messages always connected with music, so
Yeah.
it's a great way to break those borders.
And it's adding an additional language, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So we have the collective approach, the interactive approach, the bilingual approach. Music is also interactive. What else? What else do you think?
Well, for example, for me, I make like my main project, like I'm doing right now, like the Scenes Corrientes. The project consists of doing like small like translating of printing the small essays in a bilingual form. What I say about that? I do it in a flip book. In one side you have in English, and one side you have in Spanish. The intention of that was to, for example, my main focus of the project at the start was to, I only think it about the locality of in Tijuana, about bringing this text in like, so the people that could read this text in English, or well, that almost all the texts are original in English, could read in Spanish. So they have these both options of like having this like a medium, like the flip book. And in a sense, for me, when I think about why like you were saying, like this, for me too, like this physical form of the text, of sharing like a text, like for me, like for example, the project for me was like I read like for me like an essay that was very important from David Greater, like, and from there I wanted like to share the text. So I was thinking like you can send the PDF, you can send like there's some multiple options, but I thought about like the importance of like having like this physical medium that you can share, like like this format, like technical you can talk about like my scenes are like books technical, but for me like there is a very important aspect of saying like the scene, like the cultural scene, like the culture of like being there, like sharing this like for me was like very like I see like this as important. How like repeat them? How can I like share with people like I don't know, new people and have this kind of ideas and like to new people. Like for me, one of the very most important things about doing this project was to do like I have changed a lot about my relationship with the people. Like in this, the projects have only been like for a year, and so I see like the change I've been talking about, like how the people approach, how like it generated like a very interesting like conversation that is not only me reading the text, it's like having like this way of talking to the people and sharing about it. So even and one important aspect I want to remark is even if I do it like I could say I print them, I like do edition, but without the help of a lot of people, I couldn't make this. For example, like Ediciones Caradura, I sell the books there. For example, Circe, who helps me cross, like for example, to be in this event, she helps like me crossing the scenes to the border. So there is like this kind of like we say like net of mutuality that make the project possible.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing I like about thinking like, for example, like I don't think about the rights of the text because obviously I don't have like a lot of copyright of the text. Even if they are like anarchist texts in principle, for me it's like very important like bring back Raver like living as you think you are already free.
Yes.
Like thinking that you can already do the things like there is think about the world that you don't have this limit that is created sometimes.
Right.
And I think like it's very important like for the projects for it.
Like realizing it is an imaginary line. It is not there, right? It's
Yeah,
not,
so
it is not actually
yeah,
there.
what in a way it exists, but in a way you can get away from it.
Of course. What about you, Luis? How do you think we can shorten the border with our readers?
I mean, you break it by thinking about something else. That's great. Like you just said that, and it's key to Graeber's thinking, right? It's kind of like let's just where is the imagination of these alternatives? Like let's imagine them, right? And I think all this whole thing about the scene culture in a way, it's really impetus to just overcome where we're at and imagine alternative ways of both production and distribution of culture, right? That's like taken back to who makes it for who wants it, if you will, in a way, and transcending this monetary reality that right now has just shat all over
capitalist
culture,
approach,
right?
yeah.
So I don't know. I think to me, physical objects are valuable as well as events. This thing where like you got an opportunity to meet other people and try and find what's up. It really helps. So otherwise, I mean, what would I do either way? I have no idea where to go either way. You know, it's like that really breaks that border. It's like, yes, there's this place where I can go and I can, you know, give and receive at the same time from this way. So that's that. I think that was.
Yeah, definitely like having people like collaboration, mutual aid, and networking is a big thing for us as self-publishers. And like
and it's easier actually. It's easier to work with a group of people, sharing tools, sharing resources, sharing even the audience than doing it by yourself. Definitely.
And you know, breaking those like stories that we have gotten used to believe are how things are supposed to work or whatever. You know, it's like having that imagination to go like, all right, what if it's this way instead?
Yeah.
You know, then it's like, yeah, that's like of course, there's the nation state and there's the border there, you know, and the border patrol and the military and all that kind of stuff. Those are there, but how much do they overwhelm your ability to think outside that reality?
Of course.
And communicate that, and that's cool.
Yeah, and I think Diego's work in that way helps
Yeah.
that. The David Graeber translations, they really help that to overcome that mental limit. I'm sorry.
No, just in addition, I would say that I don't know, making the self-publishing. I think it is also a way to invite other people to start creating their own fanzines or books, or I don't know. I think almost in our case we started like that, like what is this little book? What is all this fanzine? It's like it invites you to start creating your own stuff. I think it's another way to cross this border of, because it invites you to start to do
it
your
yourself.
stuff. Yeah. And you see all that community, and you see all these spaces and events where you can share your publications, or you can share your ideas or your thoughts. I think it's another way to cross this border between the publication and the reader, right? Because it makes it part. If the reader wants, it can be part of the publication, right?
Nice.
Yes, I have been hearing a lot of people, and also I think ourselves, we started because we saw someone else was doing it, and I will say the zinester community is very like supporting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You wanted to say something, Amanda?
Yeah, I just wanted to add and say, yeah, I think zines for sure were something. I felt that way too, because it's like, oh, what's a zine? I'm like, oh, I could make a zine? That's so cool. Like, as I said, with traditional publishing, there's a lot of gatekeeping, and so, you know, if there's something that it's like, oh, I have this idea for like a book, but you know, it's so hard to like reach publishers and like get through that sort of border to like access, you know, those resources. But with zine and zine culture, and it's like all you need is just an idea, you know, and like you can just put it down on a piece of paper and a pen, and boom, you can make a zine, and like anyone can do it. I think after I got into it, and now I tell other people, and then they're also like, oh, what is a zine? Like, oh, I could make one? I'm like, yeah, you can make one. You know, it can be anything. It doesn't have to be like super complicated. And yeah, I think that's like really, it feels really revolutionary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that leads me to the next question, which
I think
is
it's the last question. Do we have time for one more question?
yeah. Which one there?
The free transit.
Okay, so this passport again, this passport is based in human rights. So everyone should be allowed to free transit around the world. I would love to hear what are your thoughts about that. What are your do you really think that's something possible? Do you think there is anything like a border that make it not possible? Like, what are your thoughts? Will you like to travel freely around the world?
There are some cities in Mexico I think we should put a border and never cross them. But but aside from that, like, I would love to hear you guys. What do you think about free transit? Is this like, can we make this happen? Is this impossible? Should we make this happen? What do you think?
It's a battle against property. Human rights over property rights will take care of that.
But they're communal property. You know, there's communal property. Aside from individual property, there's communal property. So this can work in several stadiums.
Yeah, that property too.
Yeah, it's property too.
Yeah, I'm talking about that property too.
So you're saying
No
It's
free
not
transit.
Human rights over property rights. So if somebody needs to cross your communal property because they have to, you'll stop them to protect your property, then you're on the wrong side of my story.
Yeah, but who says this land is mine and this land
Exactly.
is yours? This is the real question, because
Yeah.
when you say
Yeah.
this is my piece of land, who entitled you to say this
Exactly.
is my piece of land?
Exactly.
So should we put this border or
No.
we shouldn't?
no?
No.
Human rights over property rights.
Human rights.
May I take a little break?
Of course.
Thank you.
I'll be back.
Sure.
What do you think?
Just following the property. Okay, I think there must not be borders. I think everyone should be free to move around other parts of the world if they want. I was thinking on this part of the common, because we have this division on what is my property or what is public.
Yes.
But the common, it's something that doesn't belong to anyone.
Yeah.
It doesn't involve the property, because the public is from the state and the private is from a person or a group. And I like to think about this other stuff that it's like the common, right? It doesn't belong to any.
It's not public. It's not private.
Yeah, it's of everyone who wants to be there. Or I think there's no place like this right now in the world, because it's all full of borders, and every part of the territory, it's like it's this from this country and this is from this person, right?
Yes.
So I think it's hard to find these spaces. Do you know a space that don't belong to a country or a person? Or
There are kind of autonomous communities in Mexico,
Yeah.
just like the Zapatistas. Or
yeah, they're above the state, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
that they use their own laws and communal government.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I on that, I don't know. I think there must not be these lines dividing the countries. I don't know. I think everyone has the right to go everywhere, even if they don't have money or they don't are from that or that country, right? Because if you were born in Europe or in USA, you can go almost everywhere you want if you had the means, right? But it is not possible for everyone, right?
That's right. At least put the same ground to everyone, right? Like
Yeah.
at least. Even if we can keep borders, the thing about free transit is like it's above borders, you know.
Why is the commodities, why they can go free everywhere but people can't, right?
Mhm.
It's like
Yeah. I mean, I would say like the ideal for me is really like abolish borders, right? And that is like something that many of us are like shouting and really are trying to strive towards, but it feels like it's this utopian vision for what humanity should be. And you know, I'm like trying to think of a place also that there's no, where there is no, like, that is borderless. I mean, I think some people have this sort of privilege of living in a way that makes them feel like there are no borders, because you can go anywhere. So if you have the money for it, if you have this, you know, even like class status, race, and the citizenship, like an American citizen is totally more, has more access to being able to travel freely, right? But that's not the case for everybody. But I think with this free movement, I also think of how at this time, like, there's a lot of people that are moving, right? But you have a term like a transplant, right? Like somebody who's moving, and it's almost like in a harmful way, right? So how do you also balance this effect of, you know, you wanting to be in this place, you want to move in here, but that comes at the expense of kicking the current person living there, like kicking them out. And a lot of the times, none of these people ever meet. You never are going to meet the person that used to live here, but you're gonna come into a space that's like that's suiting your needs, but somebody else was living there and it was not their choice to move. So that's like a very complicated thing to deal, because you multiply that millions and millions of people. So how do you take space that's technically taken? I don't know the answer for that, you know, but I think it's just to be a respectful human being, and that's apparently a very hard thing to ask. But you know, like, yeah, like right now, even now as we're speaking, there's how many people stranded in the border, in La Línea de California, Texas, Arizona, that are in this limbo of wanting to move to a space that they can survive and they can have a life, and are not being allowed to, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's almost like that's their life, because it's like living there for so long, like you have to survive with what you have in those resources. But that is what, like, you know, should be eliminated. It should not be something that like a system that is in place. So like that is what should be abolished. But this is what borders create, and I'd like to live in a world where that's not, like, people aren't suffering like that.
Definitely.
Are borderless walking around possible? Objections, Diego, Amanda?
Well, for me, I think that like we should have what? Sorry, like we have like the right to be able to work where we want. One thing for me, like, is very important about like free movement is like giving access to free movement is that way, like having like alternative, like having other ways, like I can say, like, I'm repeating myself, like having this relationship to other people, because if you're able to move freely, you will confront these new things about meeting new people, having to have, how do we move freely about the world, because like you were saying, like you go to a place that versus like the place that is common to you, you are like going to other common place for other people. So for me, it will imply that we will need, we will have like a better relationship with people. I don't think it will be perfect, but at the same time, I think like it pushes like an imaginary barrier or border to be able to like have like a better relationship or way of communicating, of collaborating between people of different societies around the world. And at the same time, I think like a free movement society will need like have these sets of thinking about being more open to the other and being like more open-minded about a lot of things that need to change to have a really free movement. So like,
Definitely.
Yeah. I mean, I think.
I'd say we have time for one final answer.
Okay,
It's
yeah.
not to draw a temporal for here, but
That's cool. My answer will be short because pretty much I agree with what everyone said already. And I think both Diego and Ivan brought up sort of like the idea of like what you would need respect for the people and also the land if this sort of free movement and free transit was available. I think it's like an amazing idea, but I mean, obviously there's so many logistical issues that would potentially come up with that, and that's like too much for my brain to even like comprehend. I'm like, oh, so many things to think about. But yeah, I mean, it just sounds like such an amazing concept, and like, but you're totally right. Like, I can't see it happening unless people were able to respect each other and like treat the land as it deserves, and like, you know, all that comes with that.
Yeah, I think in general it's a way. I don't know. It's like we are making our way to make it free transit for us, and it will be great if it will be just a decision of that person inside the border and the person outside the border, like individuals talking to each other instead of the systems we built around and systems taking decisions when individuals might be able to take decisions. And that's my ideal, my utopia about like crossing borders. Like, can I come into your house? Like, yes. Can like I have intercourse with you? Yes. Like, you know, like borders, individuals, like agreeing.
Yeah, for me it's like a decision about between love and fear. Love makes you open the door to other people to your house, and fear makes you put bigger locks into your door. So like if you choose love, definitely you're gonna lean more to open borders, but if you choose fear, definitely you're gonna lean to the other side. And thank you so much for being here. Thank you for coming all the way up from TJ, and thank you for sharing your scenes and your thoughts about borders. It's been really enlightening for me, and thank you all for being here. Our passport is for sale at Beyond Baroque's bookstore, in case any one of you want to get one of these. Thank you so much again, Anthony.
Round of applause.
Thank you so much. That was so cool.
If you haven't spent all your money at Zine Fest.